I'm Jean Flanagan of the Somerville Producers Group, and tonight we're gonna actually have a mixed media show, and I'm gonna talk to my friend pretty soon over here. And what we're gonna do tonight is sometimes when you look at our retrospectives, you see we do a year and we take tapes from a year. And what I've chosen to do tonight is a little different. I've taken one former SPG member, and we're going to look at her work that she's done. So the title of the show is Ingrid Speaks. So here's my friend the frog, and so we're gonna listen to Ingrid tonight and see all the things that she's had to do, and look at how her work's progressed over the years that she was part of the Somerville Producers Group. So the first piece we're going to look at is called metalsmithing, and I think it's a fairly representative of how a lot of SPG people begin their work. She was taking a course at Cambridge Center for Adult Ed and asked her teacher to come in and show her work of metalwork and in jewelry making. So we're gonna look at this tape as she casts a piece of silver in some cuttlefish bone, and she explains what she's doing. And let's go to the tape.
This is basically the stuff that sits in parakeet cages. It's very, very soft. You just sort of saw down through the half this way and then down this way. And then I carved out.
What is this stuff?
It's cuttlebone. It's from the cuttlebone fish.
Oh.
Okay. And the nice thing about the cuttlebone is it has these lovely little striations sort of from the bone, which is really neat. So we're going to pour molten metal. You only get a one shot, so we're going to pour molten metal straight into that.
So we hope this works.
Yes.
I'm sure you do too. But I want to know how you got that design in there.
Right. Basically, you can take any kind of tool. I took the back of a paintbrush. And what I'm going to do is carve into the finishing sprue in here, and to show you how easy it carves. So I've carved a little design, and now I have to make what they call the button. So this is just a little area where I can cast, actually I'm going to use this a little bit smaller. So I just make a little hole, a little area for me to cast. So I have this little area here, which is kind of smaller here.
Right.
And then I open that up, and we'll continue that down a little bit like so and like so, and just start to carve this out. It just flakes right out.
It does.
Yep.
How big is this fish? I have no idea.
Cuttlebones can be about that big. A lot of times when you get squid in a restaurant and you think it's squid, but it's really not squid, it's actually cuttlefish. It's in the squid family. And it does get a little smelly after you'll know it.
You've been working with cuttlebone, haven't you?
Yeah, well usually at the school they all get really angry when I do all this massive cuttlebone casting, because they can smell it. So you can see how easily you can make any kind of a design, you know, really simply. Here's my other half.
And nothing happens to this cuttlebone when you
yeah, it burns, but it doesn't
affect the design.
No, not at all. So we'll see how steady of a hand I have tonight. Okay, so then I take a little bit of tape. Did I get some
binding wire?
Duct tape?
I can do some duct tape.
I had some duct. Yeah, there we go. So duct tape. I love duct tape. It's like the universal tape.
This is thin, skimpy stuff. I've never
had
this stuff.
This is the jeweler's tape. These were undernourished ducks.
Right. Now we know more of the difference.
This is winter ducks as opposed to summer ducks. All right, so I just match the two halves up really well, and then I just tape this up really tightly. And some people use binding wire, but I think tape is better because I think you get a much better seal with duct tape. And then there's some of us, of course, who are tape challenged. And I may be one of these tonight. No, it's going to be actually fine. It doesn't have to be, you know, rocket science, but it gets close in here. All right. Then the next thing we need to do is to come over here. We need to what's the best way to approach this? Let's put that over here. And then I need to make a little channel here for myself. Kind of bury things. This is just to help sort of steady it as I pour. A little piece of metal in there. This helps me sort of steady it a little bit as I do the pour.
Do you know how old this is?
How old? Cuttlebone? I'm not sure. I don't even know who was the first person that tried it. I mean, there's all kinds of, like, the Ashanti casters who've done certain kinds of casting, and I could not tell you. You've stumped me on that one, so maybe I'm going to have to go find out. I don't even ever thought of that the first time to do that. So this is a piece of silver that I had from a previous cast, so I'm just going to go.
Poisonally looks finished already to me. Hey,
you've been in my class long enough. You should know that that doesn't look terribly finished. So we're going to go to a beefier tip too, because I really need to get some heat on here.
Right, and these are different tips than we have in class.
Yes, we have a Prestolite system. This is a Smith torch system, which is a little bit more expensive, but I really like the way that
it fires up.
Works up. Yeah, yep. So you want to open that, and that's borax. That will help keep the metal clean. It'll take all those yucky oxides out of there. So we're going to get some real heat on here. Really kind of fun. This will take a second to kind of melt down, but I've got my beefier tip. We'll wait a second on that. I call that the Metalsmith pixie dust.
How long does this take?
Just a few minutes to really get going. You can sort of watch that start to. So it's a big chunky piece of metal, but like I said, I've got a good size tip on it, so this will heat up. This is a ceramic crucible, which will retain the heat really, really, really well.
Now, is that a big chunk of metal?
Yeah.
For that?
Yeah. Well, not for that. It's probably going to be over, but I'd rather have over than under.
And can you double it up? Can you double that amount, or how much more?
Oh, I can put a lot more silver, if I want. But you have to be careful that you don't want your designs to go like an undercut. They can't go around, because this is a gravity feed. There's several different types of casting. The cuttlebone casting is basically a gravity feed.
Right.
There's also a centrifugal caster, which depends on metal molten, which swings around in a kind of an arm and slams the metal into the crucible. You probably heard the term lost wax casting. You probably wondered, well, what in the world that is, other than I know I don't have my wax anymore. Well, when you carve a piece of wax, we put it on something called a sprue, and what that sprue is a little piece of wax which is attached to a little secondary piece of wax, a little button at the bottom of, think of it like a soup can, and that soup can is filled with something called investment. It's sort of like plaster of Paris, and you heat up, or you not heat up, but you take the plaster of Paris and you put it in a what they call a vacuum caster inside of it, and it takes all the air out, sucks all the hair out in this one side of it, because you want the grain in the plaster itself to be very, very, very fine. Okay, this is about the time where I'm going to throw a little bit of my pixie dust in there.
And what's that doing right now?
Just cleans the metal. That's all it does. It's like the flux. It's the same way. It just cleans the metal. This has borax in it. Same as the other one. So,
and at what point does this lose its integrity as a piece of?
Probably about after a couple of castings, you really don't want to use it. You have to add back maybe about 50% pure scrap work back in. Okay, this is getting going now. So anyway, go back to the casting. After you've bubbled all the air out of the investment casting, then you pour it into this flask, and then that flask gets put into a kiln upside down, so all the wax drips out where your positive was and now makes a negative. and either through a vacuum, like pouring it through a vacuum of gravity feed that actually has like a vacuum that sucks it, or through a centrifugal caster, which sort of throws the metal into it. That's how you cast. But until you make something called a rubber mold, you will lose your casting pretty much forever. All right, we're starting to get close now. You can see it now. It's getting very liquid. All right, so I'm going to transfer my hand into the other hand because I'm obviously right-handed here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is you want to just hang on to that pan a little bit. Yeah, that's fine, just like that. So now the next thing I need to do now is to heat up the pour spout a little bit. Okay, swing it just to the right. No, that's good. Swing it just to the right there. That's good. That's perfect. All right, so I need to keep this hot as I pour. Hopefully I can do this. Oh, it looks like it's split. Okay, that's it. Okay, that's it. And yes, it's going to be incredibly stinky here for a bit. Sorry about that. But
I told him it would smell like rotten eggs.
Well, no, this isn't rotten eggs. This is fish.
Right.
This is basically fish. I need my copper tongs.
Your copper tongs.
That are over there so we can actually plunge this in the water pretty. It looks like my split a little bit, so if I split, I probably won't get as good a cast as I had hoped. But we'll see what we get. That's always kind of the fun part of it.
Pretty quickly
once
it goes in there?
Yeah. I can plunge it right into the water now.
And do we have to pickle this, or?
Yeah, eventually. But you'll see what it looks like. You can see it's...
Oh, yeah.
It's heating up right in through there.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I can just pretty well pull it apart now. It's cooled down enough. Somewhat. Voila.
Now we see.
Now we see whether I
if it worked.
Messed up or not.
I'm gonna see how that thing is doing in the.
Okay. Well, it's probably all cooled out. Oh, we got little something. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
See that? Oh, that's just the cuttle bone that's stuck to it. And we got a little bit of a design coming through here.
It worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is one way you can affect the outside.
Right, right. There you go. You know, you can see a little bit of a little design right in through there.
Wow.
So we can let that.
And when you turn it over?
Then you get the
cuttle
bone marking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can use that in a design if you want to have that that design come up. So clean
Very
it up
nice.
a little bit. So that's how you do that.
And so if we wanted to patina that,
if you want to patina or color it, there's several ways that you can color this. Silver takes best with something called a liver.
Hi, welcome back to the studio. That was Ingrid working with her metalsmithing teacher from the Cambridge Center for Adult Ed. That was the first show that Ingrid did as an SPG member in 1998. In '99, she did two more shows. In February, she did one called Food for Thought, in which she and a friend of hers actually did cooking, and Ingrid talked about the history of food and the history of farming and agriculture. And so we're going to watch that, and we'll see how she's changed a little bit of her style. You see a little bit more of her involved in it rather than someone else. And we're going to see some of the things. Ingrid always liked to have a fairly complex show, which you can kind of even see from that show initially. So let's watch her show on Food for Thought.
What a day. What a day. Oh, what do we got? What do we got?
You know.
Oh, more people who need to be fed.
Excellent.
Oh, she's emaciated. Oh my God. Give me that one.
This one needs a sandwich.
Oh, badly.
Oh my God.
Very badly.
Oh my God.
Steak and cheese for all of them.
Yep.
Oh, I'm getting hungry.
Oh my God.
What are you cooking me?
Cooking? I'm cooking.
Yes, you're cooking.
Oh, I guess I should make you eggs.
No.
Feed me gravy. I need
Feed me gravy, feed me cheese.
Oh, you poor kid.
Uh,
All right, I'll cook for you.
yeah, what you
You're
got?
doing dishes though.
Oh, we'll do rock, scissors, paper for dishes.
Okay.
Today was hard.
Oh yeah?
Yeah,
What was it?
it
School?
was good. Oh my God, you would not believe what we learned in school today.
What?
Oh my, we learned about the history of everything, really. Just the history of everything as you know it.
You mean food-wise?
Well, of
Anything to do
course.
with food, because I am starving. Do you mind if I get this going?
No, please, please, please. I'm
All
starving too. Basically, what we did was we talked about why. Okay, it's about food, and the fact that how we eat today basically comes down to the Neolithic Revolution, about 12,000 years ago, 12, 13, 11,000 years ago, around there. And you can call it a revolution.
What do you mean a revolution?
Well, because farming and herding happened.
Yeah.
And basically, I mean, it's all supposition because there's very little available from back then. What are you making?
I thought I'd make us a lemon risotto kind of thing.
Lemon risotto?
Yeah, I found this recipe today. I was reading in the paper, and it just sounded pretty good. It was rice and lemon and eggs, and you could use the eggs, you know, if you need some protein to
Yes,
heal up
I
over
do need
there.
some protein. I didn't take my calcium pill today. Okay.
All right.
Where was I?
Well, don't worry. I'll feed you.
Okay,
we'll get
baby.
You we'll get you plenty of calcium because there's cheese in here too.
Oh, cheese.
So I just figured we'd give this a shot.
Okay.
And you're still doing dishes.
I'm still doing dishes?
Yep.
Okay, what was I telling you? I was telling you about...
The revolution, the
Oh.
Neolithic Revolution,
Yeah,
something like that?
just changed everything.
Was that-
and it kind of comes down to the fact that there was enough time to... Well, I mean, initially when they started planting and herding, it didn't offer them up more time, but they were able to eat more calories per square inch per time unit per person. And that once they got it down, they were able to grow in population. And
So you mean once they had plenty of time on their hands because, what, one little patch of garden in their front yard
yeah, that's
fed them
it.
for a year and
That's
they
it.
froze it? or
Maybe
did
a
they
patch
can?
about this big,
Yeah,
just about this big,
Uh-huh.
fed like thousands of people.
thousands of people. Okay.
But no,
Anyway.
but basically, what
Yeah.
it comes down to is that this leisure time that was freed up, first of all, more food meant you could grow your population size.
Okay.
So you could have people focusing on technology, on arts.
You mean back then you had people already? You had, say, cooks who would cook for these technologically refined, or-
No. We're still talking small populations because we're talking about societies that went from nomadic, and we're talking about maybe, what did she say? Something like 70 to 90 childbearing units in a nomadic clan. So that's not that many people.
Childbearing unit, would that be women?
I don't know. So I guess all you'd need was maybe 3 or 4 guys. You
3 or
know?
4 guys.
Yeah, you don't
Woohoo!
need more than that. So, but once you can plant and herd and basically count on your food source,
Yeah.
and you can spread out your time. So
Okay.
it's a revolution akin to the Industrial Revolution.
Okay. So, does that mean that everything changed for the better once,
No.
as a result of the Neolithic
No.
Revolution?
No,
Why
because
not?
what happened? How did she say?
I mean,
this?
you would think
She
so.
said, well, the thing was that do you need any help?
No, I figured I'd do this, but I'm happy to listen and learn here.
Okay. God, you're using all our lemons. Oh well. I was gonna make a lemon meringue tomorrow, but that's fine.
Okay.
We'll
Well, I'll
get
get you
more.
some more, I promise.
No, it didn't change for the better. Because you are such a dear. The
Anyway.
food.
So why didn't it change for the better? I mean, it sounds like it would. They have all this time on their hands. There's this huge farming, if it's not a little square. It's a huge farming
Tracts
area.
of land as far as the eye could see.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
then what?
a couple of reasons. First of all, a lot of the, how did she say this? First of all, once they switched over to farming, some of the populations relied too much on one source of food. So what would happen, and what they have been able to find out through discovering bones, is that there were huge protein deficiencies in these farming communities. So it didn't necessarily extend their life at that point. It didn't necessarily make them healthier. And in the beginning, it didn't even free up that much time until they really got it down.
So why would they have these protein deficiencies? Because they were living solely
they were
on
like,
grain?
all they were eating is wheat.
Oh, okay.
Morning, noon, and night.
Okay.
So and no more. And these were, I guess you could safely say, based on what she said today, was that these were probably solely agricultural societies. And so, because if they were herders as well, they would have been eating their protein.
Oh.
But
not yet.
What?
But not yet?
Well, in different places, it happened at different times. That's another theory. It's like they used to think that that agriculture and herding, and I think this is so stupid, but that it was only discovered once, that it could only have been invented once. But as they have evidence in Mexico, in Peru, in different places in the Near East, and they think also in Southeast Asia as well, that they were farming as well, except the culture or the terrain is that much more wet, so nothing could be preserved, really. But they found a bean. They found a bean.
They found a bean.
They found a bean that
Now
they could determine was, they could determine that it was a harvested plant. Do you know what I'm saying? That they can look at a bean or at a piece of plant that has been fossilized and figure out if it was a plant that was being bred. And I have no idea. She didn't go into that. I don't know how.
Back then, a genetically altered bean?
Not genetically altered, but something that had been produced so many times that somehow the genetic structure is like that much more set.
So sort of, they recognize a more developed being an evolved.
For instance, the first maize, the first corn-like stalks were that big, and then so they were selecting. Well, they didn't get that big, but then they were selecting the beans for them to grow stronger. Anyway, did it get better? No, because then there's the other part about it is that a lot of today was so fascinating. Wait a minute. I want to show you this first. Okay. Because I didn't tell you this before. We have to get back there because it's really amazing.
We'll get back there. Okay. 1 second.
What do you do?
Now, I put salt in here and there's...
Salt! Did you know?
Hi. Welcome back to the studio. Well, Ingrid has sort of started what we will start to recognize as some of her style, one of which that time is just sort of not on her radar screen. She just floats along and says what she wants to say, and she, in this particular segment that we didn't show after the segment, she says salt, salt. She starts talking about the value of salt and where the word salary comes from, which is the Roman soldiers got paid in salt, so they get paid from the salaria, where the salt was stored. So she sort of wanders off, and she wanders back into other topics and wanders sort of all over the place. And it's kind of an interesting show with some segments thrown in. So she's still doing studio work, and what we're going to see in the next segment, we're going to see her next show, which was also in '99, a couple of months after this one, still early in '99, where what Ingrid chose to do now was to go out, tape some footage, and come back into the studio. And we're going to see two segments from that called Red Line Notes. So let's look at segment 1. This is Hi. Well, we're back in the studio. We didn't get to the segment of the tape that we wanted, so rather than watching a whole nother introduction, the Red Line Notes is clearly about being on the red line. She went down into the red line. She interviewed musicians. So we're gonna check out what she found out about musicians. And let's see it.
To be hypnotized by those lines when the war hits. There's our souls do what the big machines are drawn, and that's what it fills their hearts. I don't feel the dreams at all. And then your drink and lay your money down. When you play, you will hear the sound of like you and I, just beginning to shine, to shine. Pray for peace. Always an open window. I wanna be free, I'm free to walk to sin discard of you. Oh, the fear, grace within these dreams. I want to be forgiven. For memory of sin. I've been waiting so long. Shine to shine. This love is so strong. I've been waiting so long.
Is that your own brush? No. It's your other thing.
Somerville Community Access.
Can you tell us how you get a pass and where you go?
It's real easy. And thanks for reminding me, because mine's up at the end of March. You go down to the Back Bay station, and there's this little office in the back corner of the place. You walk in. It's the same office where you get senior citizens passes and things like that. You walk in, ask for a musician's pass, show some ID, sign a piece of paper, and that's it.
So you don't have to audition?
You don't have to pay, you don't have to audition.
Oh, you don't have to pay even?
No, it's free.
It's a free deal?
Yeah, apparently it's just for tracking. So,
oh, okay.
I guess they're trying to keep the paper companies in business or something. But, it's easy to get.
So how long have you been playing in subways, and how do you like it?
Probably about 2 years.
Yeah.
And I used to be kind of ambivalent about it, but now I really love it.
Why?
I used to only play about a couple times a month, but now I play several times a week, and it's great practice. It's very good for teaching you to get over stage fright. If you can play with trains running through, and the occasional wino coming up and asking you for a spare change. Stuff like all sorts of wild things happen. Little kids run up and run right up to your knees and stare at you.
Right.
It's very good for working out material.
Right.
And, it's income.
What?
It's income.
Right. How much do you make?
That's a good question. I think I'm averaging. It makes a big difference selling CDs. If you're just relying on tips, then you don't make nearly as much.
Right.
But I think I average probably $30, $40 in tips, and then 3 or 4 CDs per time that I play. Sometimes more, sometimes less. So I'd probably come away with anywhere from $50 to $100 when I play, and that makes a pretty big dent in the rent.
Right.
So,
Sounds like it.
Hi, and welcome back to the studio. That's the beginning of Red Line Notes by Ingrid Dabringer. And she went out into the subway and she just filmed musicians and went up and chatted with them. And so what she does later, we're going to see a segment from the end parts of the show. She interviewed a number of different musicians. And then later in the show, what she's going to talk about now is what she discovered and what kinds of questions she went in expecting to ask versus what kinds of questions they responded to, or like the question she thought wasn't really relevant. So we're going to go and watch for some of that. And the tape is rolled too far forward based on what I'm looking at here on the tape. So they're going to have to roll it backwards a little bit more and find that thing, that segment. Ingrid stopped Somerville Producers Group after she had her first child, shortly after she had her first child, and then she's now has 2 little children. So I saw her last summer, and her youngest one is crawling around on his knees, wearing out all of his blue jeans. So we're going to hear Ingrid talk about. We're going to hear Ingrid talk about the experience of filming all these musicians in the Red Line.
Next stop, Broadway.
I did this show. I went out and I filmed on the Red Line with one main question in mind, and that question turned out to be, in some ways, totally inappropriate, as it turns out, in terms of the musicians' opinions. And the question was, I find it interesting that I find that there's a gap between the audience and the musicians. I feel like the audience sometimes doesn't want to interact directly or wants to throw their change in right at the last second. So there's a sort of protective quality, or there's a notion of not wanting to get too close to the musicians. And in some ways, it turns out that question is irrelevant to the musicians, because I began to ask them these questions and they'd look at me really quizzically, and it turns out that they just love to be out there and play, and that in many ways it doesn't matter to them whether someone gives money or whether someone doesn't give money, or when they give it, or whether they feel like backs are turned. A lot of them just love to see so many different faces, and that the audience was continuously changing, and that basically if they could play with trains and people and all sorts of stuff going on in completely unpredictable situations, that they could really play anywhere. So that was the initial question that I went out with. And then somehow the question wasn't appropriate, and I just started taping the people. And I ride the T all the time, and I love people watching, so I think that's the main point of this tape. By the way, you're watching Dead or Alive, and we put on a live show every other Tuesday at Somerville Community Access Television. So if you're interested in community television, feel free to come on down and get involved, because it's a lot of fun. You can go out and just tape stuff willy-nilly and put on live shows. So I do have a public transit fetish, as it turns out, and I have a short film that I made called The Bus Stop, and it's about 6 people waiting at the bus stop, and it's pretty well about body language. So without much more ado, we can go to that tape whenever we want to.
Hi, and welcome back to the studio. So that was Ingrid's explanation of her experience interviewing the musicians for her show called Red Line Notes. And she clearly had a good time doing it. And she also showed a clip later that was of a piece that she actually, a little short movie that she made with actors, sort of stressing her love of the public transportation. So the next segment, we go to the year 2000 now to see two more of her works, at which point I was already in the studio. I was part of Somerville Producers Group, which was how I met Ingrid, and I was part of creating these. So let's go to the first tape, Life as Death Itself.
Ancestry, it is a road to look at and to derive meaning from, although you don't know where you belong in that road. And it is difficult to know what happens to those who die. I think conviction goes a long way, but in the final analysis, it's impossible to know what really happens. And to feel part of that string of events, I think, brings meaning to life in the space that death will provide for us. And I want to tell these stories about these people because I think All Hallows Eve could be a time where the stories, where our connection with these people, if there were a time where we could celebrate, like the Mexicans do, with the Day of the Dead, where the relatives come and they eat with the living, and the Mexicans, they don't talk about the dead, they talk to the dead. And so I want to tell a story about this man. This man is Fafa, which in Danish is father's father, and he is my husband's father's father. And my husband takes any chance he can to pee in the great outdoors. And he tells this story of him and his father and his grandfather all lined up on the dunes in Denmark, peeing. And I'd so wished that he were alive so that my son could stand there with those three men, the four men all together, and they could pee together on the dunes. But I know what will happen is that my son's Fafa, which is my husband's father, they will do that together. And that continuity brings meaning to death as well as it brings meaning to life.
Hi, and welcome back to the studio. So we start to really see Ingrid get wax philosophical as we start watching Life as Death Itself. And I think that what we're not going to find out in this tape by watching them, we're going to watch another segment from this tape also of Ingrid speaking, but part of it was collaborative. It was a Halloween show, and in between some of these spoken segments that she did, we had tapes of various Halloween events. And so each person just brought in, the topic was Halloween, so each member just brought in a random tape of Halloween. So cemeteries, poetry reading, music, a little Halloween sketch on bringing an infant around trick-or-treating. And so then she just did these as these segments interior to those portions. So here's her doing a little segment that's on Celtic traditions around Halloween and dying.
And witches. On the other side, the Aztecs and the Mexicans, the night of October 31 issues in the Days of the Dead, which are November 1 and November 2. And they believe that the dead come back to feast with you, and you should make especially aromatic dishes because they actually feast off of the smells. And for them, it is a beautiful time when they make sugar coffins, and kids wake up and say, "Where's my coffin? Where's my skull?" So imagine that for a moment, that those words could be used in play. We do have a sense of ceremony, but it's a little bit superficial. It's, it doesn't leave anything, it doesn't leave us any help in terms of how to deal with death. So we've missed the boat on that one.
Hi, and welcome back again. And that was the second segment from Ingrid Dagbringer's Life as Death Itself show in 2000. The following show, actually, she did another show in a fairly similar vein, talking about her family. Excuse me. Talking about her family. And in this one, instead of her being on the set speaking, she chose to actually be offset. She had musicians, the same musicians that were present in the prior one, and she has dancers who are actually doing improv dancing to the music, and then her voice interrupts them. So we're going to watch a segment from that show.
Meidän pappa hade doktor Dabringer. My father also turned out to be a Dr. Dabringer. My father isn't one to boast or embellish, but he certainly sets himself up for some serious misadventure, which make for some fairly unbelievable stories. We were standing at the bottom of a mountain that climbs out of the Filacha Ebene, my father's childhood plateau. We hadn't quite yet reached the trail, and my father said to my brother and I, he said, "I built the hut at the top of this mountain, so we do not need to use the trail." Granted, this man is 45, and he built it when he was 15. We'd always grown up hearing these stories of my father and the hiking club members hiking up the mountain with picnics, skis on their backs, and bricks, laying them down and skiing down the mountain. So it's not as though we hadn't heard the kernel of this story before. Needless to say, we cut into the woods before we even saw a trail. We walked up, we walked down, we walked up, we walked down, we walked up, we walked down. We walked up every foothill at its longest point, I'm sure, and down every foothill to its steepest point, I'm sure, and turned a 4-hour hike into an 8-hour hike. Round about the 7th hour, confidence seriously waning, my father always keeping up a cheerful, fatherly stride. The sun setting, we come out onto a clearing. Green, beautiful, lush, the size of a couple swimming pools, Olympic-sized swimming pools, of raspberries, entirely of raspberries, nothing but raspberry bushes. Like robots, we walked into these bushes and fisted raspberries into our mouths, handful after a handful. I felt like a bear. I don't think I'll ever quite feel like a bear like that again. And all of a sudden it didn't matter that the sun was going down, and I didn't know which way to turn to get to the top of this mountain. I thought I'd reached the top 3 times already. After about half an hour, we finally got moving again. And we reached the hut with a thimbleful of dusk left. Every time I eat a raspberry, no matter where I am, everything I love about Austria swells up. I can smell it and taste it and hear it and see it. And I'm sure that that story was nowhere close to misadventure for my dad.
Hi again, and good night. Thank you for watching the Somerville Producers Group and Ingrid Dabringer's associated work with Ingrid Speaks.
My dad.
And we look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday. Good night.
my dad, and my mom. My dad and my mom met on a boat. Das Wassermann. My father was on his second exchange trip to the U.S. from Austria, his first one when he was 17, and then again when he was 21 or 22. My mother was on her way to spend a year in Paris